Story 1. Original post. Am I the a-hole here? My 39 female ex-husband, 37 male, is insisting I change my last name back to my maiden name because his new fiancé, 24 female, feels it will be awkward for her and I to have the same last name. Am I the a-hole here for refusing to change it? My ex-husband has been dating this woman for 3 years. For context, she is 24 years old. My ex and I were married for 12 years and have been divorced for 5 years. We have 3 kids together who are now teenagers. My ex and I got divorced because we were young when we met and got married, and we grew apart as people. It was a mutual decision, and we agreed our kids came first and have always co-parented very well. This has been the case up until the last year when his girlfriend moved in with him. Previously, we would do holidays and kids' birthdays together. Now, when she is present, they won't even sit near me at our kids' sporting events. I have always been nice to this woman, despite my kids expressing they do not like her, and they feel their dad acts differently when she is around. My ex told me early on she wasn't a fan of me and felt I intimidated her. When I asked him for examples of how intimidated her, he said it's my favorite, that I have resting bee face and it makes her uncomfortable. My ex and her got engaged over Christmas, and my kids were less than thrilled, my daughter especially. She feels her dad made a major life decision without even talking to them about it first. My ex called me yesterday, saying he is giving me a heads up that I have a year to change my last name back to my maiden name as his finance is expressing her distaste and concern for her and I to have the same last name when they get married. I told him we agreed in our divorce that I could keep his last name until I felt the need to change it, and that is what is listed in our paperwork. I also told him I don't want to have a different last name than our kids. He said I'm being unreasonable and refusing to see how this would make his finance uncomfortable. I told him I can't see it from her side because I am a grown-up and not an immature child like she is. He told me I could ask anyone about this situation and everyone would agree with her. So, am I the a-hole here for refusing to change my last name to make her happy? Now for the comments. Not the a-hole. Tell him you'll only consider changing your last name back to your maiden name if you can change the kids' last names also. If he doesn't agree, he can sit on it and rotate. I did offer that as a solution, and he completely lost it, saying he is their dad, and they deserve to have his last name. Yet when I said I wanted the same last name as our kids, he told me that wasn't a legitimate reason to not change it. Well, he's wrong on all counts. He needs to come to terms with the fact that this isn't his name, it's yours now too. I'm sure other people exist in the world with the same last name. He needs to get over it. Not the a-hole. He told me I could ask anyone about this situation, and everyone would agree with her. You should definitely send him a link to this post. I would be surprised if anyone sides with him. I don't blame you for wanting the same last name as your kids. I would not blame you if you had no kids and simply did not want to deal with the name change hassle. Again. If she does not want to share a name, hubby can change his last name to match her. When my parents divorced, my dad demanded my mom change her last name back to her maiden name, and he told this to the judge. The judge laughed in his face and told him that's not his or her decision. It's my mom's. My mom told him that she didn't have his last name. She had my last name. The whole reason she wanted to keep it was to have the same last name as me. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. It's not his name anymore. It's your name. If his fiancé doesn't want to have the same last name as you, that's fine. She doesn't have to take his name. Or they can change both of their names to Mr. and Mrs. Big Crybaby. But no, he does not have the right to force you to change your name. Your feelings don't matter less than hers just because she's the new Mrs. Crybaby. Exactly this. It's OP's name now, and it's been her name almost her entire adult life. Her career, whatever it is, has been built using that name. Her friends, colleagues, and acquaintances know her by that name. Her whole identity is built around her name. There is exactly one person who gets a vote on what OP's name is, and that's OP. The audacity of her ex. Update. Several of you have asked for an update on my ex-husband, giving me a year to change my last name back to my maiden name because his fiancé was uncomfortable with her and I having the same last name. To clarify, the reason he gave me a year is because they are getting married sometime next year and wanted my name changed prior to their wedding. Anyway, my ex called me yesterday and said he had done a lot of research on ex-wives keeping the ex-husband's last name after a divorce. He stated he didn't realize how common this is, especially when there are children from the marriage. He also said this had been my last name for 17 years. My entire adult life has been with this last name, and I have built a career with it. He basically acknowledged that every reason I had to keep it was legitimate. He apologized for the way he initially approached me about changing my last name and explained he is in a bad spot trying to make his fiancée happy. He also explained she feels that by me keeping his last name must mean I'm still in love with him, and this is my secret way of assuring we end up together again someday. I informed this was not, nor will it ever be the case. Yes, I care deeply about him because I was married to him for 12 years, and he is the father of my children, and I want him to be happy in life. However, I fell out of love with him many years ago, and that will not change. He said he informed his fiancée that he will not bring this up to me again, and if she didn't like it, the ball was in her court to decide if she wanted to continue their relationship. Thank you all for the feedback on my original post. I never expected this kind of response, and an overwhelming amount of comments and advice. Now for the comments. Call me a cynic, but I can't help but wonder if him saying he did a lot of research is code for he found your "Am I the A-hole" post and saw that the comments were overwhelmingly against him. So many of us on the original post called it that the request itself and timeline of the request were rooted in the fiancé's insecurity. Regardless, I'm glad for this outcome for you. Edit. Since people keep bringing it up, and I can't reply to every comment because this got more traction than I expected, it's been brought up repeatedly that OP's original post was shared and discussed at length on other social media such as Facebook and TikTok, as well as the Today Show. There was and is plenty of opportunity to see or hear about the post without being on Reddit. So not everyone is on Reddit, and the world doesn't revolve around Reddit. People are kind of missing the point. Yes, not everyone is on Reddit, and no, I'm not overflating its importance. But plenty of Reddit content, including the original post, shows up elsewhere, and plenty of people not on Reddit see it. I was reading about Reddit posts on Facebook for years before I became a Redditor myself. With how far-reaching the original post was, it's not outside the realm of possibility that the ex saw it somewhere, or someone he knows did. Possibly on Reddit, possibly not. He's marrying a child who is too immature for marriage. I guess that's what happens when you're almost 40 and start dating a 21-year-old. Not the a-hole. What is wrong with these people? Main character syndrome is rampant. My best friend's sister-in-law refused to come to his wedding because he and her husband had the same first name and same last initial. She felt her sister chose to freaking marry my friend as a way to show her up. No one fought very hard to talk her into changing her mind, LOL. My mother-in-law and father-in-law's second wife have exactly the same damn name. First, middle, and last. Think, Linda Ann Brown. Your ex's new fiancé should simmer down. Or consider getting him to change his last name to hers. What a hell of a update. Genuinely the only way that this should have ended for the both of you. Glad cooler heads prevailed. Still not the a-hole. And imagine being so insecure that you cannot live with the fact that there is an ex who still shares the last name, as do their kids. I still stand with my remark to the original posting. If this woman needs to have a last name with her future husband, and it shouldn't be the name the ex still has, they can change their names to her last name. Ex-husband can then work around the hustle of having a different last name than his kids. He can start to throw money into changing documents to the new last name. But he finally came to his senses. I'm glad he apologized. Now, if he can figure out that the reason he's in a bad spot is because he has chosen a person to be his partner who is not at all ready for the complications of a blended family, he'll be all good. Sounds like he might be on his way to that realization. Story 2. Am I the a-hole for telling my wife to stop treating her sister so badly after her sister confessed to having feelings for me? My wife and I have been married for 10 years and together for 12. We have 2 children. My sister-in-law, Jenna, is a single mom as her husband sadly passed away 7 years ago. When Jenna's husband passed away, my wife and I provided support for Jenna and her daughter because it was a really traumatic time for them. Over the years, my wife and I spent a lot of time over at Jenna's house, and she would come over to our house. I also developed a really strong bond with my niece. My wife, my children, and I had a really strong connection with Jenna and her daughter, and we were a really tight-knit group. That was until a few months ago when Jenna confessed something to both me and my wife. We were all drunk and having a good time, and Jenna kind of just blurted out that she developed feelings for me. I was shocked, and Jenna just burst out in tears and said a lot of things like how she was really grateful I was a father figure to her daughter. I don't really remember too much from that night, except that my wife kicked Jenna out of our house after that. My wife and I had a talk about it the next day, and my wife was obviously not happy at all. She said she had suspected this for years, the way Jenna was acting around me, and she couldn't believe how Jenna betrayed her like that. My wife said we would cut off all contact with Jenna, and I did accept it. My wife told me to block Jenna, which I did. However, I feel like this whole arrangement has been a bit harsh, especially towards my niece. My niece has been texting me a lot, and I've showed my wife the texts, telling her it was unfair that we were punishing our niece too. My wife told me it was a consequence of Jenna's actions. However, last night, when my niece sent a really long and sad text about she and her mom were feeling, I felt really bad and had a talk about it with my wife. I told my wife to stop treating Jenna and her daughter so badly, especially after they both went through a traumatic time. I told my wife it was wrong what Jenna did, but at least have some sympathy. I told my wife to imagine if we were in Jenna's shoes, and then one night, tragically lost me. That would scar her for her entire lifetime. However, my wife got really sad after I said that and just broke down in tears. She didn't say anything except that she loved me, and she didn't speak to me the rest of the night. I do feel guilty about what I said. I didn't intend to make my wife feel like this. Was I the a-hole? Now for the comments. The audacity to say it right in front of your wife, her sister, is insane to me. Drunk or not. What the hell? Not to mention how ridiculously hypocritical it is for him to tell his wife to put herself in her sister's shoes after getting stabbed in the back, while he can't be bothered to put himself in his wife's shoes. Stand by your wife and respect her boundaries. Yes, it's very unfair to your niece, but you're not the one who created this situation. Again, stand by your wife. Your wife is correct about creating some distance. Your sister-in-law and niece are clearly slotting you into a partner or dad role, and some boundaries need to be reestablished. The fact that your sister-in-law was bold enough to admit those feelings in front of your wife is already alarming. Your wife generously allowed another woman and her child into the space that is normally occupied by only a spouse and her own children. She gave up your time and attention to her sister, who needed emotional support, and her child, who needed a male figure in her life. Your wife's sister has now betrayed your wife's trust by confessing feelings for you. Your sister-in-law and her child have been in the middle of your marriage for 7 years, and now that sister-in-law just wants to take the whole thing. Your wife has every right to feel hurt, betrayed, enraged. Her sister wants to take her entire life. I think your wife has given enough. You're the a-hole for defending the woman who wants to take what's left of your wife's life after she has given so much already. Yes, it's sad for the niece, But your responsibility is to your wife and your children. Your sister-in-law has had 7 years to heal from the loss of her spouse, but apparently didn't need to make the effort because she had you to fill that space. You are defending the woman who wants to steal her life and replace her dead husband with you. You don't see what's wrong with that? You don't see that your wife has lost her sister, as good as a death, because she will never trust her again and likely never forgive her for having feelings for you? Nasty. Yikes. You can't understand how hurtful it is for you to stand up for her sister after her sister admitted to overtly and repeatedly flirting with you around your wife. You do realize that when your wife said she suspected it, she was giving both you and Jenna the benefit of the doubt. For years. That was her not treating her sister badly. Her sister could have kept that to herself. She chose to say it. Not because of alcohol, but because she was hoping you'd throw over your wife for her. She knew better. And her husband died 7 years ago. That is way too long ago for any of you to act like that. Gives her permission to act like a homewrecker. You're the a-hole, for one. It's not your place to tell her to forgive her sister. How would you treat your brother if he did the same thing? It also sounds manipulative on the sister's side to have her daughter text you. Maybe I'm going out on a limb and it's my opinion, but you are also manipulating your wife to see your side. Why the need for you to mend their relationship unless you have feelings for her sister and are using the niece as your excuse? Like I said, just my opinion. Thank you for listening. If you like the video, consider like and subscribe. If you want more stories like these, turn on your notification to receive the latest stories.